I was labeled husband material on our first call. She bombarded me with 50 intimate questions at lunch, so I ghosted her on the drive home. My worst date ever. This incident took place about a month ago. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I reached out to a 23-year-old woman on Facebook. We started chatting soon after. Typically, when two strangers start talking, there's a certain level of awkwardness. People tend to hold back their quirks. But this situation was different. She seemed unusually at ease, talking like we had known each other for a while. I asked for her number, and she surprisingly agreed. She even said she'd call me that night. I found that unexpected, as it's not common for someone to take such initiative so quickly. During the call, she came across as pleasant, though a bit too curious for a first conversation. Despite not knowing much about me, she expressed a strong interest. At one point, she even said I was husband material. That caught me off guard, especially since I had already mentioned that I wasn't looking for marriage. She insisted that life without marriage is hard, but I clarified that although I was single, I was emotionally close to another woman. After hearing that, she retracted her comments and soon stopped communicating. She said she only wanted to invest emotionally in someone she could marry. I respected that, and we ended things. Fast forward 2 weeks, I went on a weekend trip to Goa with some friends. It turned out to be one of the best experiences of my life. I posted a few pictures on social media, and out of the blue, she replied to one. We started chatting again. This time, she was initially a bit more reserved, though that didn't last. In hindsight, re-engaging was probably a mistake, but I was curious where it might lead. As we resumed talking, the conversations took a more intimate turn. She shared personal experiences, desires, and fantasies. Being in a suggestive mood myself, I reciprocated. We discussed quite a lot. Preferences, past experiences, even things like stamina. This was the dynamic as I prepared to return to my home state after 4 months. Because of work, I live away from my hometown and family, and I only visit every few months. This trip home was primarily for medical treatment. Once she learned I was back, she expressed a desire to meet. I told her I had a doctor's appointment, and she backed off. Days passed, and eventually it was the day before I was scheduled to leave again. She had been acting fairly normal during this time, which made me second-guess myself and feel a bit guilty. So I asked her out for a meetup that day. We met around 2:30 p.m. It was our first in-person meeting. She looked different from her photos, but she was still attractive. After exchanging greetings, we walked toward the cafe she had chosen. Along the way, she shared stories about her neighbors, her fondness for a certain culture's food and fragrances. Once at the cafe, we were shown to our table. I handed her the menu and asked her to place our order. After making our selections, we resumed talking. From the start of the date, she talked extensively about her family, friends, college, past relationships, almost everything, even before. We reached the cafe. On the walk there, she asked if I was enjoying the date and if I liked her. Once seated, the questions kept coming. Her first question, "What happened with the girl you said you were close to?" Then came a rapid-fire series of questions. My income, family size, breakup history, my brother's job, number of beaches where I live, what I ate for breakfast, and why I didn't want a relationship with her, all before the food even arrived. Her order came first, and she started eating without waiting. I sat there, still waiting for my food. Between bites, she kept asking questions. If I cooked, how hard competitive exams are, where I'd want my honeymoon to be. She also shared a lot about herself. Career goals, future plans, ideal partner, traits, even how she lost her virginity. Then, the question circled back to me. Did I have other women in my life? I mentioned my best friend. That led to more probing. How old she was, her occupation, where she lived. When I said she was married, this woman actually sighed in relief. She returned to the topic of the woman I had once been close to. Questions followed: her age, profession, and why we didn't date. She also brought up a friend who's a nurse, dating a doctor, and I joked that maybe she should find a doctor too. She replied, "I don't need to. I have you." That line raised all sorts of internal red flags. I reminded her again that I wasn't interested in marriage, now or ever. She casually said, "Don't worry, I'll speak to your mother." Again, completely unfazed. She then accused me of not wanting commitment but still being physically interested. I asked her when I had said I wanted anything physical, and she brought up a past conversation about sexual fantasies. I clarified that sharing a fantasy doesn't imply intent. She disagreed, saying it was all the same. Her casual attitude throughout made me very uncomfortable. Eventually, I decided to wrap things up. I asked for the bill and double-checked if she wanted anything else. I hadn't even eaten properly but just wanted to leave. When the bill came, she didn't even look at it. While I always intend to pay, every previous date I've been on involved at least a conversation about splitting the bill. This time, nothing. After paying, we stepped out. She grabbed a mango lassi and offered me one, which I declined. Then, sipping her drink, she casually asked why my last relationship ended. I told her I wasn't comfortable discussing it during our first meeting. Her response? "Maybe that's why she left you." I bit my tongue. I was done with the conversation by that point. While we were still in the cafe, she had shared that she didn't initially want to accept my friend request. When I asked why she did, she said her ex was attractive but cheated on her. And now she finds herself drawn to guys who are less conventionally good-looking. That's why she accepted my request. Again, said with zero hesitation. I barely spoke. After that, we stopped by a bookstore because she was looking for a specific title, but the prices were high. I gave minimal responses and just wanted to leave. Eventually, she may have sensed my disinterest, and we both headed home. On the way back, I sent her a long message stating clearly that I wasn't interested in a physical relationship or a romantic one, neither now nor in the future. I told her I wanted to avoid any misunderstandings. She replied, saying she had nothing more to say to me after reading that, and that, quite honestly, was my worst date ever. Now I keep wondering, did I do something wrong? Should I have handled things differently? Or was agreeing to the date itself the mistake? My neighbor was stealing my water, so I handled it quietly. I live in Asia and recently bought a new house. The previous owners were family friends who urgently needed money and had been living abroad for nearly 3 years. Because of that, I was able to get the house for a great price right in the middle of the capital. The deal was finalized at the beginning of this month, and I moved in immediately. The house was definitely a work in progress. The owners had left mid-renovation, and the main door had only a padlock instead of a proper lock. There was no gate either, which meant anyone could just walk in freely. On my first day, I found a random bike parked in my garage. I moved it out to the road and installed a gate the same day. A man came banging on the gate angrily later, but I didn't respond. From my window, I saw him give up and take the bike after about 15 minutes. That wasn't a great first impression of the neighborhood, but after that, things were mostly calm. The only minor problem was people not realizing the house was no longer abandoned. My gate kept getting blocked, but putting up a no parking sign quickly solved that. Last week, I was taking a shower and noticed the water pressure was unusually low. At the same time, I could hear the water pump from the house next. Door running. My neighbor is an older man who lives on the ground floor of a 3-story home, with the upper 2 levels rented out. This guy wasn't happy that the house had been sold. He had expressed concerns to the previous owners, my friends, and they warned me about him. But I'm a 6-foot-tall man with 3 dogs, so I wasn't too concerned. And rightly so. He never caused me any direct trouble. In homes like ours, A water pump is needed to push water to rooftop tanks because the municipal water pressure isn't strong enough to reach higher floors. The sound of his pump running when my pressure dropped seemed too well timed to be a coincidence. Once his pump shut off, I turned on taps in my house, and the pressure was back to normal. That raised a red flag. If he was tapping into my supply, it would explain the water bills being unusually high, even when the house was unoccupied for years. We had assumed it was due to minor leaks, but now things were adding up. Somewhere over the past 3 years, this neighbor probably decided to save money by tapping into the water line from my property. I couldn't find the exact point he was siphoning from, but after testing the pressure several times, I was nearly certain. I debated whether to confront him, report it, or just ignore it. Water here is inexpensive. My monthly bill, even with 3 dogs, weekly car washes, and watering the garden, comes to around $5. Even with him taking some, it wasn't a big financial burden. But the issue wasn't about the money, it was the principle. It didn't sit well with me that someone felt entitled to use my resources without permission or payment. I decided I needed to send a message. So, on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited for his pump to start, then turned off my supply. In our system, tanks are filled using a ball valve that detects the water level. When the level drops, the valve signals the pump to switch on until it's full. If water doesn't enter the tank, the pump keeps running, trying to fill it. That's not good for a pump. My goal was to overload it and cause issues for his tenants, who rely on the water just as much as he does. What I hadn't considered was how badly this would affect his outdated electrical system. His house still had wiring from the 90s, and the pump running continuously all night caused a power overload, blowing fuses and frying the wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard people in the house talking quietly, trying to figure out why they were, the only ones in the area without water or electricity. The situation escalated when the tenants started shouting at their landlord. Tenant protection laws are strong here. Water and power are considered essential services. Landlords are legally obligated to ensure both are available unless interrupted by natural causes. Because he failed to maintain both utilities, the tenants were furious. One of them moved out 2 days later after learning that power and water wouldn't be restored anytime soon. Both tenants ended up filing police complaints. Under local law, when someone is clearly violating regulations, the police can issue fines directly without needing court intervention. If the accused believes the fines are unfair, they can challenge them, but still have to pay up front. Now the landlord is stuck. He lost both tenants, has to pay a $500 fine, which is a significant amount here, and must return both tenants' security deposits. He also can't rent out the property again until he upgrades the wiring and water systems, which adds to his expenses. At the moment, he's preparing to move in with his daughter because he can't afford to live alone. His tenants were his only income, and as a retired mechanic, he has no other earnings. He eventually figured out what caused the pump to burn out and came over to ask if I had turned off my water. I simply told him I had discovered a small leak in my tank and shut off the water until the plumber arrived. The look on his face said everything. He stayed composed but clearly understood what had happened. All he said was, "Oh, okay," before heading back inside. Whether he realizes I know the full story doesn't matter. I'm not worried. Next week, I'm getting a plumber to redo my piping and eliminate any connections that extend outside my property. So with just one turn of a valve, I resolved my water problem and dealt with a potentially troublesome neighbor. 2 birds, 1 stone. I bought a long-abandoned house. Turns out, my neighbor was illegally tapping into my water line. I shut off the water while his pump was running, which ended up burning out his system and cutting power and water to his tenants. They filed police complaints and now he's been fined, lost his tenants, and is forced to move in with his daughter. How I exposed my ex-Mill's lies and got her shunned by her church. I'm a 46-year-old woman, and I have 2 daughters, ages 17 and 15. Their relationship with my late ex-husband's parents 78M and ADF has been rocky for years. Things escalated after my ex died in an accident last year. Alongside the grief, we had to deal with the fallout of his infidelity. He had fathered 2 sons with another woman, who also died in the same incident. Since then, my ex-in-laws have tried to gain custody of my daughters and even pushed to move into our home. We're currently in court over custody, but them living with us is not an option and never will be. We live in a town with a charming weekend farmers market that sells fresh produce, meats, and handmade goods. This past weekend was special because it was my youngest daughter's birthday. Her party is later this month, so I gave her a budget and let her explore the market on her own. Predictably, she spent most of it on sweets and chocolates. About an hour in, I started to get worried. Just as I reached for my phone to check on her, she called me, crying. She said a group of unfamiliar women had surrounded and confronted her. My older daughter and I rushed over and found 6 elderly women chastising my younger daughter. They accused her of being unchristian for refusing to see her paternal grandparents and not wanting to act as a good big sister to her late father's other children. My daughters were the ones who discovered his affair and the existence of the boys. It was traumatic for them, and they've been working through it with a therapist. I stepped between my daughter and the women and instructed my eldest to take her sister's items and head to the car. Then I turned to confront the group. Some of them I recognized from the church we used to attend with my ex's family. They had the nerve to say I was the problem for not obeying my ex-in-laws like a good Christian wife. Honestly, it was nauseating. The argument grew heated, and eventually, we were all asked to leave the market. The women followed us out like a pack of vultures. I got my daughters into the car and drove home. Later that night, after my girls went to bed, I reached out online to a friend from that same church. I explained what happened, and after apologizing, he gave me some insight. Apparently, my ex-mother-in-law had posted a long, dramatic message in the church's Facebook group. In it, she portrayed my daughters and me as heartless, accusing us of leaving her and her husband destitute and alone, even though my daughters inherited their father's personal bank account and life insurance. She also blamed us for the boys being placed with distant relatives, claiming we were responsible for her losing her grandsons. The post read like a script from a sentimental TV drama. Unsurprisingly, some of the more extreme church members rallied around her. Now, this church isn't exactly progressive, especially regarding LGBTQ+ issues, but one thing they take seriously is marital fidelity. Cheating is unequivocally condemned, regardless of gender. To twist the truth, my ex-Mill fabricated a story. She claimed the woman my ex had the affair with was our surrogate, and I rejected the boys because they were male. A revolting and baseless claim. At this point, I had enough. Because my divorce wasn't finalized before my ex died, I still had access to every bit of evidence. I was also free to use it without legal repercussions. So the next day, I took my day off to visit a print shop. I had everything printed. Photos of my ex with his affair partner, some even taken in our living room. Their text messages, conversations with his parents in which they condoned his behavior. Messages where his parents harassed me about the divorce, and, most disturbingly, messages where they insulted my daughters. In one, they called my girls bastards and said it was their fault their father died because they exposed the affair. That message was sent just 2 days after his death. I paid extra to have everything printed on high-quality paper. Once home, I spent hours assembling personalized binders styled to look like the hymn booklets the church hands out for services. The first page featured a photo of my ex and his affair partner kissing in our home. Their faces were clearly visible. Underneath, I labeled it the love story of ex-husband's name and affair partner's name. The woman bore no resemblance to me. Different complexion, different hair color, completely unmistakable. Before the next Sunday service, I dropped off the binders at the back table where extra hymn packets are kept. No one monitors what gets placed there. Word spread fast. The church gossip machine kicked into overdrive. The names my ex and his affair partner were called on Facebook were so extreme the pastor had to intervene just to tone things down. People were appalled at how my ex-in-laws treated my daughters. Interestingly, I still got blamed for the divorce, but now the congregation said it was understandable given the circumstances. Some even suggested I might return to the light one day, unlike my ex and the woman he cheated with. They used another term I won't repeat here. 2 apology letters arrived in the mail, both addressed to my daughters, along with an invitation for me to attend church services for emotional support. As for my ex-in-laws, they were publicly shamed and ended up leaving the church. My ex-Mill later posted on her personal page about how isolated she felt and how no one values the elderly anymore. She lamented the loss of her wonderful son, claiming he would have taken care of them if he were still alive. That's unlikely. He had no income. I was the one supporting the household. One final note about the inheritance. My ex had a will that listed his parents as beneficiaries. I was under the impression he had updated it to name our daughters. I never fought to be named myself. My own will designates my children as my beneficiaries, not him. Hurt my friend? Good luck staying in school. Back in the early days of the internet, when it was still a promising new frontier, I was enrolled at my local junior college. Not long into the semester, I moved in with my girlfriend, let's call her Lucy, so we could both cut down on rent. One evening, Lucy mentioned she'd invited a classmate over for game night. Sounded fine to me. We also had a few other friends join, and the night turned out to be a blast. Interestingly, Lucy's classmate, whom we'll call Sarah, was someone I actually knew from high school. We weren't especially close, but we were friendly and got along well. From then on, Sarah became a regular visitor, dinners, movie nights, and game nights. She occasionally brought her boyfriend, Jay, but he never really meshed with the group. He was distant, barely spoke, and always seemed like he wanted to be anywhere else. No one was comfortable around him, but we kept inviting him out of courtesy to Sarah. Thankfully, he only showed up a couple of times and usually found excuses to skip. A month or 2 into this routine, Sarah called Lucy in tears, asking if she could come over. Naturally, we said yes. When she arrived, Sarah explained that Jay had become increasingly upset about how often she spent time at our place. He accused her of cheating, though she didn't say if he thought it was with me, Lucy, or both. Whatever. He thought it was unfounded and never happened. The confrontation escalated. He started shouting at her, using cruel language. When she tried to leave, he shoved her, causing her to trip over a coffee table and fall. She ended up with a large bruise on her back and hip. I didn't see it myself, but Lucy later told me. Sarah had shown her the bruise. Sarah insisted this was the first time Jay had ever laid a hand on her, and believed it had been unintentional. Still, I was furious. You don't hurt my friends, and you especially don't assault women. While I'm not a violent person and have never been in a fight, I couldn't let this slide. So instead of fists, I chose a different route. At the time, I worked in the school's administration office as a student employee. Part of my job allowed me to access student records, class schedules, fees, even ID numbers. The deadline to add or drop classes without penalty was approaching, and that's when my plan came together. I pulled up Jay's student record, copied his ID and key details, and waited. On the very last day to modify class schedules, I used the dedicated enrollment phones in the admin office. This was before online registration systems, and dropped every single one of Jay's classes. But I didn't stop there. I enrolled him in as many random classes as I could find that came with additional course fees. At our school, unpaid fees meant you couldn't access transcripts or request other important documents. One important detail: Jay was an international student. If he wasn't registered for a full course load, he risked losing his visa and being forced to leave the country. I kept quiet about what I'd done. No one knew, not even Lucy or Sarah. I didn't want it traced. Back to me. but I did get a little confirmation that things had worked. Sarah was nervous about running into Jay again, since they still shared an English class on Tuesdays. But when Tuesday came, something interesting happened. Jay showed up. But there was someone new in the class too, standing because there weren't enough chairs. The teacher noticed the discrepancy and took roll. Guess who wasn't on the list? Right, Jay. He argued with the instructor, but since he wasn't officially enrolled, there was nothing the teacher could do. That was the last time Sarah saw him, in that class. Eventually, Lucy and I broke up, and I didn't stay in touch with Sarah much after that. Out of curiosity, I later checked Jay's schedule again. All the expensive classes were gone, and he wasn't enrolled in any others either. I assumed he'd been dropped or had to leave school, but I never confirmed it. Regardless, Sarah didn't have to deal with him anymore. And while part of me occasionally wonders if I went too far, I always come back to this. He absolutely had it coming. Mess with me? Fine. But mess with my friends? Good luck with your education.